that somewhat horrific video of the three-legged race that went up in the south. And I think it was your sister saying that the last person who wanted to be in a three-legged race with was there.
Yeah, look, I'm the youngest of 6 girls, 2 younger adopted brothers, a couple of foster sisters. So Erin and I are the youngest 2 girls. So some of those early recall, being the youngest, not so clear. But once I saw those videos, it was like, that's real. That's your video. And yes, I would say we tend to pair off, and Erin and I are the youngest too. So we would probably possibly. So I think that little girl she was pushing down would have been me. But yeah, we had an awful lot to do with each other probably in our earlier years at school, and then did a little bit. What I'm very proud to say is, that's that kind of thing. I can run and bike and swim. Of course I can. But can she row? No. So that's a one-up on it. But apart from that, I guess we went our separate ways a bit. Although I did compete a little bit in triathlon, and did some different stuff, I guess, in life. So a lot of some similarities, but quite a few differences too. I'm
going to have to say, from having spoken to her last week, I think your challenge about rowing might be taken up. I wouldn't put it past to getting into a skiff now. So I thought we might start kind of, even though we mentioned the three-legged race, start at the end. So you were mentioning to me just before we let people in that you are one of New Zealand's, if not New Zealand's, longest-standing local councillor, and you're in the city of Wanganui, where I did my schooling. I went to what was then Wanganui Boys College. I think it's Wanganui City College now.
City College.
Yep, and to Wanganui High School, and clearly Wanganui Collegiate was strong, and I think then it was St Augustine's and Sacred Heart. So quite a lot's changed. Tell us about, first of all, Wanganui as a city. What's good about it? Because you've been there for a while, there must be something good.
Oh, look, definitely. It literally does have one of the most temperate climates in New Zealand. I just read this week, because I've got some of my rowing buddies coming for Queen's birthday, that it was going to be raining from Monday to Saturday. And it was beautiful yesterday. And, we're just getting a sprinkling of rain now. So it's got a really temperate climate. It's, an hour and a half from no more, literally from the ski fields. If you're a ski bunny, it's 2 hours, and 2 hours from Wellington now, with the big motorway happening through there. An hour from Palmerston North, a couple of hours from New Plymouth. So it's not a long way to go to a bigger place. But it's had, I think affordability is what I'd say is, it's a very historic town. I think one of New Zealand's 4th oldest city. Obviously it's a port city, so it's got some beautiful older buildings. It's nestled in between a couple of hills. It's got the sea, the river, lakes. In fact, it's how New Zealand Masters Games, which are over 30 years old, do belong to Wanganui, although we share them with Dunedin now. That event's had over 75 sports within a 5-kilometre radius. So it gives you an extent of the sporting facilities it had. And then it's got this very big arts and cultural drive. I think that's really driven up in the last 20 years, maybe. It had the only New Zealand glass school, and quite world famous at the time. And still, you can be a glass art student, and we've got glass blowing in Wanganui. And of course, the Sargent Gallery, a beautiful, beautiful building, is being rebuilt.
Wow.
It's being kind of rebuilt in the centre of town. Don't ask me about the cost increase in that, or why the velodrome isn't being re-roofed, but that is another story. But the velodrome track is being replaced.
Right. So has there ever been a building that government, central or local, has commissioned that has stayed under their budget?
And great schools. a range of schools.
Yes.
Yes.
I saw the other day that they said that there's some port expansion as well. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's really exciting, and that is really with iwi, Tupuaha. I think it's one of those things we actually gave the lease away to the port something like some 20 plus years ago. Actually, Michael Laws's Rain is Near, possibly one of the better things he did was buy back that lease.
Yes.
The port probably got quite run down. We're certainly not, but coastal shipping is kind of on the increase, particularly, I guess, with, I don't know, petrol and those, travel, those kind of travel issues. So that's all one from, actual more active port to fixing up the moles, and to kind of recreational water use is being worked through with those parties, including Ngā Tangatiaki is actually in charge of Te Awa Tupua, which is, of course, a living person, our river.
Yep.
Horizons City, the regional council or the district council.
And the river's a lot cleaner than it used to be. I used to kayak in there a lot to get fit for rugby, and the odd exploding sheep wasn't a lot of fun.
No, it is. We actually, the whole stormwater stuff we looked at. That's my very early days in council was when, so there hasn't been pollutants going into the river for many, many years. You may get the odd sheep after a flood. I've only hit 2 or 3 in my time in my single skiff going backwards.
Cool. I'm going to let Rod Dixon in because he's obviously got home, and we'll get Rod to say hello. Sometimes he contributes insightful questions.
Please don't, Rod.
Hi, Rod. How are you? Oh, the sound hit.
Hi, Rod.
From in a minute. Hi, Rod. How are you?
Hey, Owen. Is Philippa on?
He sure is.
Oh, perfect.
I am.
Hey, Philippa.
Hi, Rod.
How you going?
I'm pretty good, thank you. Oh, I can see you now. Hey, good to see you. Gosh,
Good to see you. Are we recording?
Yes, we are.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so no swearing, Rod. I had to put it up on that before.
No, I just it's Lorraine Muller's birthday today. So I've been in Nelson. I've been running around, and I've just been talking to her, and she sends best wishes to Philippa and everybody. So cool.
Lovely. Yeah, I've managed to meet all these wonderful people. Probably a little bit more through Erin when I am overseas, and spend a bit of time in Boulder, Colorado, etc. So, but obviously, Rod and I last saw each other in Wanganui, celebrating. In fact, celebrating the
Peter Snell.
The Peter Snell, the death, really, I guess. But we actually got we had a statue actually done that I was part of a number of years ago. But the Cook's Gardens, of course, the mile has now got international status, hasn't it, as an international mile?
Yes, exactly, and it's just so. Obviously, it goes right back to Deerfoot and 2nd century, when you're running mile, and ran it. Roger Bannister breaking the 4-minute mile. Peter Snell setting the world record. John Walker setting the world record. Jack Lovelock, of course, in 1936. So huge history. It's so wonderful that Athletics New Zealand has reinstated it as a national championship. And so now what I do with the kids marathon with 26.2 miles, we can now get the kids thinking about running the mile again and working towards completing their mile. And it doesn't have to have a clock on it, but just to run the mile, to experience running 4 laps in the history of New Zealand. And very, very exciting. So thank you.
So what did you see the over the weekend, the Prefontaine Classic? And they traditionally have a high school runner in some of the races.
Yes.
And so a high school runner, I think from Newbury Park School, ran the mile. And I kind of felt sorry for the guy because he was at the back of the field for the whole mile, just hanging on by his fingernails. But he ran 3:56.
Exactly. And that's what's incredible. The fourth fastest in history for high schooler to break the 4 mile. It's very, I mean, and there again, the mile is now back. I was part of a campaign 10 years ago to bring back the mile back to school because 1,600 meters didn't mean anything to them, but the mile does. And I just remind these kids, by the way, there's twice as many people have climbed Mount Everest and have run a sub 4-minute mile. So just know that you're part of history. And these high school kids, I think it's almost double in the last 2 years. High schoolers breaking the 4-minute mile as to the previous 10 years. So it's very exciting that these kids have got it. But I like the idea that they reflect back on the history and the history of the mile and what it means, because that's part of the inspiration, that's part of who they are, it's part of the foundation. And, Philippa and Aaron and Dixon and Walker, we grew up with a heritage of New Zealand sport that sometimes I talk to the young kids today and they only know current athletes. They don't skip back. And this is what you're doing, Alwyn, is just fantastic. And a lot of the schools I know are communicating to the students to listen to some of these incredible athletes, and Philippa Baker is one of them.
Of course.
Just really briefly, I Christian Conda, this Whanganui Collegiate boys, just broken the 4-minute mile, I think, in America. And he went to school with my sons. He's just 20. And sorry, I've lost his name, but there's one of those young Whanganui Collegiate boys. May have been a boarder, but who's in that Commonwealth Games team. So Alex McNabb, got to mention him. He'll obviously, he's a guru of running here. But I mean, John Walker. I mean, I was the kind of kid that had just so many different sporting icons, and watching John Walker. I better get the year right. 76. Winning his Olympic gold was just incredible, and I've met him in person. I met Sir Peter Snell when we got his second. Of course, he's got his own in his hometown, Opunaki statue there, but Wanganui, because of the 4-minute mile, has a beautiful bronze, full bronze statue also of Sir Peter. So rock along here, people. Wanganui.
Actually, what was incredible, just the second, my phone, and I just happened to look down because I was, just because I'm not expecting a call, I just got a note from Theo Quacks, who is the son of Quacks, and I sent a blessings to them on May 28th when we lost 4 years ago, and Theo's just written back, appreciate Rod as well with you and New Zealand people. So just know that we still honour Dick and his contribution and his spirit, and especially for me with John Walker, Dick Quacks, and myself, the three musketeers, I guess we can call ourselves.
Absolutely.
All good. And some of the best moustaches in sport.
So if I just interrupt, Sam, was that who you're thinking of, Philippa? Sam Tanner?
Yes. No, not Sam, although I do know the name.
Okay. I think it's the boy who won the 3,000 meters earlier in the year with that incredible final 200 meters.
Yeah.
If you
pulled up the list of the Commonwealth Games, I'd know him, but I just not Santana. But I know that name.
Yeah, he won the 1,500 meters at the classic, and setting a New Zealand. That was his personal best time, 3:34.75, and that's significant because he's getting into the top 10, 12 in the Commonwealth. So that's going to be very, and I'm hoping, of course, that Athletics New Zealand or the Commonwealth Games select him. A lot of the selections have been made based on performances over the New Zealand summer, but really, with all due respects, these athletes have got to go to the pre-classic in Europe and run in these big international meets to get the times. And you don't want to be in your best shape in January. You want to be in your best shape now, a month to 2 months before the Commonwealth Games. So hopefully there's some more athletes who are competing really well in the international stage will be selected in the next selection. So it's good to see these kids having to, perform in these big meets. And as I say, Sam Tanner won the 1500 against. He was ranked number 4 or 5, I think, but he won it tactically, and that shows that he didn't try to run away from them. He ran it tactically and beat some of the athletes who have been beating him tactically. So you learn by doing.
You do. Geordie Beamish was the boy, and just
Yes.
basically to say though, we know that us ex-internationals should all be the New Zealand selectors.
Good. Actually, Philippa, Geordie Beamish just equaled my 5,000 meter time, exactly to the 100th of a second. So Pete Fitzinger, CEO of Athletics New Zealand, of course, he had to send me a note that now you are sharing number 4. Very good.
He hasn't got you yet, Rod.
No.
So that's incredibly encouraging, all of that for young people in New Zealand, because I still think, we sometimes feel like we're a long way away from where things happen, but sometimes we don't hear the stories as well. I think Nick Willis at times was almost anonymous, and you would just wait for the 2-year or 4-year cycle, and then suddenly people would remember him again. And yet in between time, he was doing incredible things.
Absolutely.
Incredible.
Week in, week out. So so Steph, Philippa talked earlier about some of the family situations, but you started in triathlon, and I have an interesting person that I taught when he was in the 4th form or year 10 at Tauranga Boys, and that was Mahi Drysdale. And I don't think I recalled him having a sporting bone in his body. And he went off to university in the Waikato, and he'd grown reasonably substantially. I think he ended up about 6'5". And one of his friends said, well, why don't you come down and try rowing? And I think 2 Olympic gold medals.
And a bronze.
And a bronze, and a number of world championships. So one of the things that 5?
Yeah.
One of the things that for me is of interest for yourself and for Mahi is you tend to think of rowing as this school sport that leads to the Māori Cup, and that if you haven't done it, where's the pathway? And you both found a pathway. How did you do that?
Yeah, and just and yes, I was even slightly shocked by Mahi, even though because he was like he's a couch potato for all I knew, until suddenly he pops up and off he went, and that's what he says.
Yeah.
But I didn't even know about rowing at school. Yes, I was in a competitive, or a family of 6 girls, and younger brothers, like I said. But the 6 girls in particular, yes, we swam from quite an early age and did everything. And I think, I guess those competitions, I think I might have got more stripes than Erin. I think I might have got 7. Not that I'm competitive at all like that. But, so we did everything at school, from swimming and athletics to softball, and I did a bit of cricket and cross country and whatever. Obviously triathlon wasn't really a sport then, and I didn't know about rowing, so I just came across rowing by accident, actually at Huitu Park, of course, the home of the 74 Commonwealth Games. When I was a hockey, I was going to go and demonstrate hockey in the middle, because I was a Canterbury hockey player. I was going to go to the track and demonstrate some hockey for some kids, and I went to the pool first of all, and I think I just had my togs on and a towel wrapped around my waist, and I was going to try some scuba diving kind of thing, that. And I just saw there were some people, Canterbury Rowing Club, just there must have been pods of people around the pool. It was quite a cool thing actually, and quite innovative for the day. I guess that must have about 82, 83, and the old rowing machine. Right. Rowers know it as the guessing, as a horrible rowing machine. Ergs are just horrible anyway. And I jumped on the machine, and they said, "Oh yeah, you look like you could do a bit of this." I guess I had a stronger upper body, which is women generally, it's the legs that are more similar to the men, and we usually have to work on our upper body. And they said, "Oh, come down tomorrow morning to Canterbury Rowing Club." And I said, "Yep, I will." And I always say I just kept going down, and I kept going back for 20 years. Not from Canterbury to Cambridge and then to Union Boat Club in Wanganui. But I didn't know about rowing at school. I guess I was 19, 20. What I say the key is that, it's a good example, our family, and that's where I think things don't change. We were 6 competitive girls. I think Erin and I would both own up and say Kathy, number 3, or the third youngest, was the best natural athlete. She was nearly, I believe, in the New Zealand and then Commonwealth Games team at the age of 14, 15. Did, I believe, break Janie Parkhouse's Canterbury 800-metre swimming record. And Janie Parkhouse went on to win Commonwealth Games gold, of course. But by the time she was about 16, she was retired because of how early and hard swimming was. I always say the real key to athletics, to success, is leaving school without being wrapped up by your parents or school or both, and still wanting to do something, follow your pathway. And I guess that was Erin and I. We just followed along and did a whole lot of stuff that obviously developed our cardiovascular system, etc. But we hadn't really found our thing. And it's that pathway to making that determination that you want to do it.
So it's interesting. One of the I was very good friends with Jack Ralston, who was an Olympic coach, athletics coach, and triathlon coach, and he sort of fell in love with a book called Bounce by a man called Matthew Syed, who's a British journalist and table tennis player. And people say to him, "Well, why did you become good at table tennis? Was it some remarkable influence?" And he said, "No, my parents bought a table tennis table, and my brother and I played table tennis incessantly. And then we went to a high school where there was someone who loved the sport. And from then on, that was what he did. But he hadn't set out at any point to say, well, I'm going to be a world table tennis champion. He just, as you did, stayed incredibly active, and then found something that he loved and could do, and got a head start. One of the things that always intrigues me is when people can, I guess, catch up. I talked to Ethan Mitchell a few weeks ago, and we talked about his relationship with Sam Webster, who was, a child cycling genius, if you like. I mean, he was powerful, just seemed fast, loved the sport, seemed fearless. If you turned up at, what were you, 20, did you say, to the rowing club, you would have been, I think they actually call it a novice, don't they? How did you feel about that process of, like, I'm going to catch up, I'm going to become competitive?
I just felt, in brief, I thought from early days, I think the part of it was no other sister had ever done this, no Baker, right, had ever done this. There was probably that in my head a little bit. I just did feel quite very quickly that I'd found my thing. But I think there's things, Canterbury Rowing Club at the time was the women's H champion. So I fell into a club that was strong. Right. And it already had a woman in that crew who'd been to the world champs in 1978. And I was like, wow. But then I also, and although I did actually, I mean, my first nationals, funny enough, I didn't go to, which is when I think how competitive I was from the beginning, or how determined I was, but I had to just finish radiography, followed my sister into radiography. So I just hung back for a national, it just didn't quite work. But then I kind of, with it, the next season, I actually, did win the intermediate 8 and the Premier 8. But then I think I said, I looked at sport and went, oh, they're pretty big people. I somehow found out that lightweight rowing was in the Commonwealth Games in 1986. In fact, it's the last Commonwealth Games, that rowing's ever actually, had officially, largely because of the cost of venues, etc. And it's not a grade Commonwealth Games sport, number of participating nations, I guess. And I found out there was a lightweight single, and I was like, right, that's what I'm going for. And I mean, I had to lose close to 10 kilos to make weight, because if you have to weigh in 2 hours before that race, so I had to be 59.0 kilos or under, and if you don't make weight, you don't race. So pretty embarrassing. They send you all the way overseas, and that happens. So I did, and so within that, I guess it was largely a winter. I worked incredibly hard and kind of ridiculous, all that stuff you do. I remember running to the lake for nationals, running up from Cambridge to Karapiro with, plastic bags and stuff, and all that stuff you do, saunas or whatever to lose weight. But I won that lightweight single, and I got to get my years right here. Yes, and I got a medal in the heavyweight single. I'm thinking, yes, because Stephanie Foster. I went on with Stephanie Foster Stephanie Foster went to the Commonwealth Games. She was really our trailblazer, and she won the women's single scull at the Commonwealth Games and the double scull with Robin Clark, a very good friend of mine. And I got a second place against the world champion in the lightweight single. So I don't know if I'm answered, but I worked out this pathway and got myself really selected, and it all just went from there.
So the time from first sitting in a boat through to a silver medal at a Commonwealth Games, how long was that?
Probably 2.5 years.
Right.
Yeah. I made an under 23 team a year before, and that happened to be, we just raced Australia, but that was a very strong team that ended up having 3 internationals in it. So yeah, so it did happen, but we'd done, and I did a whole lot of extra stuff when obviously training and systems and the mileage just tracked up through the years. But even at that time, when I was trying to finish my studies actually as a radiographer and kind of get myself into that, the elite national team, I would get down to the club an hour and a half early, and I'd run around the Avon bridges, and then I'd do a home Eki circuit, before we'd even got on the water, and then I'd a bike there. Maybe it depended, maybe I was working at Christchurch Hospital a bit, so from, maybe I don't know if it's 7-10k each way, and then back home maybe another 5k. So, that type of thing where you fit it in just extra sessions, and you just worked it out. It
doesn't sound like you slept or ate, but no, that's amazing. So when we talk to Sir Brian Williams, because he has this wonderful story where he's been involved in the Ponsonby Rugby Club, I think he said for 60 years, I coached against Ponsonby at a Premier Men's level, and it was that club that you wanted to beat and that sort of stuff. But he just said that he used the word love affair. Can people still turn up to a rowing club and go, hey, I'd like to get involved in this sport? And is that limited to age groups? Because I saw that in 2017 you competed in the World Masters.
So look, absolutely, that's what we want you to do, and that's what you should be able to, and you can do. You can literally rock up to a rowing club. In the summer, you should be able to rock up there at least 6 days a week, maybe usually not Friday. And in the winter, you might need to try and Google and contact someone, and find out there might be a little bit of a break after New Zealand Champs or Māori Cup for about a month or so. But the sport, I guess, to be interesting timing. Our sport went to a high performance centre, not that, somewhere around 2000, and just maybe before that. And it's still got a high performance centre, but it's obviously that it's decentralising a bit the rest of those athletes. So I believe that high performance centre, built up into having about 150 athletes at one stage. Wow. They're trying to have just 50, and so I guess what I'm saying is clubs, many clubs, and particularly I'd say provincial New Zealand, and we probably it took us a while to, the guts got dropped out of clubs. There became regional performance centres, 4 of those, a centralised centre at Karapiro, another 3 or 4 regional performance centres spread throughout the country, not in Wanganui, unfortunately. Our one was in Blenheim. Clubs have always been there, but that whole pathway, particularly where you don't have universities, to kind of move from joining a club and then, doing your school rowing and then where do you, and losing athletes, I guess. But yes, clubs have largely retained, are there, even though, some of them, there's the odd club in Wanganui at times that's got down to very few athletes, nearly none. Union Boat Club is the second oldest club in the country. It's the club of Billy Webb himself, Richard Tonks. It's the club I've spent my last 3 or 4 years, won a couple of world championships out of, and it's been my club for the last 25 years or so. And well, I haven't, not quite there at the moment, but it has very low numbers for a couple of seasons. But we are quite excited about the kind of Rowing New Zealand, talking to the clubs and associations again. I happen to be the president of Wanganui Rowing, so you can rock down to a club. And we'd love to put you on the water. Obviously, volunteers, and that are always, you do need people to coach. So, yeah.
Oh, cool. In terms of, I guess, I'm going to say when I was growing up, and the highlight for someone looking back in rowing was the 1972 Olympic Games where New Zealand won the 8. Is there a difference when, this is a tough question and I'm probably going to word it badly, but as a female, would you still look back at that as something that was a signpost, an important part of your sport, or would you more divide the sport up a little bit? And you've mentioned Stephanie Foster and others. How would you view that? Because you became New Zealand's first rowing female world champion.
Yeah. With all due respect, and look, sorry, I'll probably put a thing over top that I'm the president of Wanganui Rowing, and I work, I'm working quite closely with Rowing New Zealand now, and I'm all very positive about where things are going. But I mean, in all honest truth, no. Absolutely knew about the 72-8 and know some of those rowers and respect them and get on with them. But it wasn't something I kind of went, it never motivated me. It just didn't relate to me. As a female, as a lightweight. And so, no. And I guess, and to be fairly honest, there were times through those eras, because it took another 50 years for us to have just last year won that 8 again. There were times where it's like, just forget it, please. Just, I'm sorry, please, really, there have been some other things happening. Yeah. So I guess, yes, I'm, what I always say is every generation has helped. I think I'm particularly proud of a generation of women, probably Leslie Milne and a couple of other women, and then Stephanie Foster, and going on to, I guess, if I'm Brenda and myself, type, the Robin Clarks, there's a few, Linda de Jong, I could actually name these women, Lynne Hannon, Nikki Payne, first Olympic gold, least Olympic medal. I'm proud of all women. I think we've all, but I think there's probably just been that group of women, worked really hard just to get away, and then to keep getting more women away, and then then to see the Eva Swindell twins, and then to see the likes of the Kerry Gowlers and the Women's Aid, all those eras. I truly believe. What I would say is, I think the history book's pretty clear, the consistency of women's rowing from about the early 1980s has been more consistent than men. men came off the land, they worked hard with the Rossi Rocket, and then they trained hard once a day. But once they became kind of white collar boys a bit, who just, sat at their desk or something all day, the training didn't really change much. This has been very generalized, but it didn't change much, and they didn't get the results, and then they lost the competitiveness. One club dominated like Waikato for years, and they were literally winning New Zealand titles. I guess what you'd say in athletics terms, they were at 3/4 pace because they didn't have competition.
Right.
But of course, you take that overseas and you're not up with the play. Whereas what us women always had, and we, like Brenda and I were in separate clubs for most of our years, and we'd line up every weekend or two, and I was like, oh, holy shit, do we have to go through this again? It was like a world champ final, and it wasn't. And we'd have 3 or 4 of those hard races in a or more in a weekend, because we're racing the single and the double and the quad and the 8, and just head bashing. So I think women's history is, we've had to, that consistency. Hopefully, those role models we've all meant something to each other.
Yeah.
And then it's really been since about, the early 2000, maybe, Rob Waddell getting their only Olympic gold medal. But just before that, when things were at rock bottom, really, for women rowing and men's rowing in particular, then they kind of centralised it and got people the whole full-time training thing happening.
So then I watched, because I do my research like a good student. So I watched the Vienna race where you won your first title, and it looks unusual to someone who I've done a bit of kayaking, and I quite like facing forward. But you're rowing, you're obviously controlling the boat, you're observing the race, and I think halfway down it looked to me dead even between about 3 or 4 people. It must have been quite hard to kind of just not start celebrating, because it became obvious 200 or 300 meters out that you were going to win. What goes through your mind in a situation like that? Because I don't know how you didn't throw yourself into the water.
I guess I heard you talk to Erin some of the stuff the other day, and Scott, but for me, that race, I looked like, 80, I mentioned 86 Commonwealth Games, went on to the World Champs, got 4th. To be honest, I was a great trainer and a nervous racer, and that was my downfall. And then I spent another 2 years, 87, I got 5th. It was an unfair course. They said it was an unfair course, and they changed the lane order because of it, but it's no excuse still for, you never make excuses. 88, they said if I won the lightweight single, I'd go to the Olympics in heavy single. And that was another pressure I didn't handle that well. And I led that race to 200 meters to go and somehow got friggin' 4th. And just about, and fell out of the boat and all that stuff. And then eventually I went in a double scull, a lightweight double, to take pressure off myself, got a silver medal. Then I got left out of the team in 1990 because I said I wanted to go back into the lightweight single, and it was in Tasmania, Australia. Yeah. So by the time I got to 91, sorry to put you through that,
good.
I'd been through, I'd been around about 6 years and hadn't cracked. I just cracked 1 medal in the lightweight double. So the great for that race, if you rewatched it, it's never what I'm so proud of is it was like I think for years I knew the word, but like flow. It was like I was nearly outside the boat watching I just got it. I got it all together. I always had the physical ability, but it was just the ability. It was just putting the perfect race plan together, and I really did probably control that race like a Pied Piper a bit. You never know you're going to win, but everything pointed towards that I could win this race. But it was about putting the performance on the water, and the outcome would come, and it did. So yeah, that was it was just a great. And I would nearly say, and I did break the world's best time at the time, but I was, there was more there if needed. But you're not going for a record, you're going to win a world championship and New Zealand's first for women. So that was the plan.
Well, I think the commentator was quite insightful because halfway down, he suddenly looked across and said, my goodness, Philippa Baker looks absolutely in control of herself, of the race, etc. And no, it was brilliant. From then on, did you team up with Brenda Lawson and
yeah. At that stage, lightweight rowing wasn't in the Olympic program. Funny enough, by the time I got to my last Olympics, lightweight rowing was. But so for me, the next goal, kind of the single like Mahi and that. I mean, and rowing turned, well, if you're a sculler, and like Emma Twiggs, just fabulously done last year, 4 Olympics to crack a medal and to get a beautiful gold. As getting that. So once I achieved that world lightweight single, I wanted to, and fought my way back into the team from being left out. The next goal and the obvious goal was the Olympics. So Brenda and I had been kind of rivals. I mean, Brenda's, chalk and cheese people, and she was always friendly, but I'm like, oh, you don't really talk to your rivals. So a little bit like that. I mean, we did talk, obviously, but so we jumped in a boat. We weren't a natural combination, but we got selected. They did try a women's quad, but Brenda and I were quite dominant, I believe, in the trials, and we got selected. And we had another 4 years ago, 4 years together, from 92 Olympics to 96 Olympics. And if you want me to briefly, I guess 92 Olympics was in some ways a great result, even though it was 4th. And by about a canvas, I think, within 0.5 of a second, which is fairly close for a rowing boat. Our first ever women's race was at the Olympic Games,
Wow.
Things that you wouldn't really do these days unless it was COVID and you couldn't race until then. So that was, and another extraordinary, not extraordinary, but chopper blades came in. So if you look at the blades these days, if you went back and looked at my 91 race and then you looked at 92, for example, different type of blade, which has developed over the years, but it's basically the same blade. So I think not just for us, but a lot of learning there. Anyway, that was kind of a great result. So close and yet so far. And then I guess we did go on to have 2 great years, 93, 94. I'd say the strength of Brenda and I was, I'm physically reasonably similar height in that. Her name was Leg Press Lawson, to those of those that really know her.
Yeah.
And you just, she's from that crazy Nelson place. You just put her in the boat and say, go, and she just goes. But we had those 2 great years, 93, 94. They were, and I mean, look, I won't go near the thing of people say that, yes, of course, there's always retirements post Olympics and that, but we came up against, and some very impressive wins and good times, previous world Olympic champions. And I'd put it as simple as the wheels were starting to fall off. 95, we still got a bronze medal, and 96, we qualified second for the Olympic final. But when you don't have, we were struggling with a number of things. I think I would easily say I was in my 30s, Brenda still in her 20s. There were different push pulls going on in life, and I would say New Zealand, between us coaches and New Zealand rowing, we just didn't really there just wasn't quite enough support there. And I guess once you win those one world championship, the target's on you, and once you win 2, it's really on you. But I mean, I'm very proud of that we are the greatest of friends, and in the end of the day, once again, I have a bit of a saying that very few people in life, let alone sport, come away with much at all. I mean, very few people win everything, and if they do, maybe their life's a bit too easy. For most people, it's just a friggin' grind. And if you can come away with a few wins and a few losses, it's probably a pretty good reflection of life, and pretty happy with that.
Well, the honours, so in 1994, you were both supreme winners of the Halberg Award, I know people will tend to say they don't set out to do that because it's not within your control in some ways, but it must be a pretty remarkable, I don't know, thing to have on your mantelpiece.
Yeah, but yeah, it is pretty cool, and I think what's cool about that is it's still the Halberg Award. It's the same big trophy. They might have put more bigger base on it or something for all the new winners. It was, I feel quite proud, not competitive at all, that I've won 2 of them and Erin's only won 1. You got to take those wins, and so no, it's really special moments.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. And you've obviously then had, and we touched on this at the beginning, but a remarkable business career and in politics. Well, to stay in business in New Zealand is remarkable for a long period of time. But I did see something that was slightly disturbing. It said a member of the Labour Party. Is that still accurate?
Well, actually, no, I don't think I've paid my last membership.
Right.
I'm standing on the line a little bit there. Yeah, but my socialist, I'll blame my mother, and with pride. Yeah, I've got my socialist background comes back to haunt me, and that's probably where my stripes tend to lie.
Well, it's still a service, isn't it? And just say, being on the hospital board, being on council, I personally would find those things very frustrating. And I think it takes someone with a really good degree of, self-awareness and perseverance to know that doing good in those situations is a long haul, and not everything turns around in a day.
Yeah, I think and even what I find interesting, it's not about who's better or worse, but Erin, I think, lasted 5 minutes. I think she maybe lasted a term or half a term. But some of that I think is a reflection of, as an individual athlete, she, until it came to Commonwealth Games, she didn't have to be selected for anything. Whereas in my sport, I couldn't do a thing. I couldn't compete for my club at the nationals unless I got selected. And I certainly couldn't compete for New Zealand. I've got selected, and if I wanted to be in other boats, for my club and New Zealand, then you need to learn. This is not you're in boats and with other people, and need to learn to work with other people. And we all have our frustrations and all that. So, look, at part of it's, I think, just ending up in provincial New Zealand. And once you do once I gave up radiography, I worked in sport management for some time. Kind of loved that kind of area. Probably being a VZ teacher was what I perhaps should have done. But once you start, I didn't finish my rowing to 33, 34.
Right.
It took a while to have children. So once you go through that and time moves on, it's either completely retrain, or, if I'm honest, I guess there's a little bit of use your profile to get on to these things. But then I think that work ethic, I'm reasonably proud that I've had a pretty good work ethic on those, on the council and health board, and it has become a part of. I think I've always wanted some challenge and variety, and might have missed the bigger job if I stayed in a bigger place. But I've kind of been able to, work in our business, do a number of governance roles, even got a Future Champions Trust that I've, to help young athletes that I founded. So, that kind of fills in my day.
You would have been incredibly rich from the rowing.
Undoubtedly. Yeah. What one of my holiday homes around the world would you like to visit? Not.
Yeah. No, and I think that's also interesting in that, as Sir Brian said, he was an amateur rugby player, and different sports do have it, but people often tend to think of the sort of Michael Jordans of this world, or the Tom Bradys, and assume that anyone who's had a successful profile in sport for a period of time have, walked around with buckets full of money. But it's different, isn't it? It's still a dedicated thing that you do regardless of those things.
Yeah, funny enough, I don't know. I wonder if, no, probably they do, and maybe the younger, smarter people these days do. But I never thought about I should go to this sport or that sport because there's more money, you know. But I think if the initial driver is money, then, you know, I'd wonder how many people ever have really, you know, how far they really succeed, or if they have. I mean, for me, it was largely just getting my way through. You know, fortunately, I'd more or less done a radiography career by the time I hit the elite scene or the international scene, and I managed to job share, you know, work casual, whatever, sleep on an X-ray table at night and get up in the morning and go training. And that kind of got me through, and I did better than most. You know, people, some of my peers and friends were kind of a bit envious of me, and I, you know, did manage to buy a house at some stage, and you know, have the Kiwi dream along that plan. But I think even though I never got any money from, you know, New Zealand Sports Foundation at the time until I won a world championship, and even then I thought, I must use this for my sport. I must, you know, no, I would never thought of using it for living expenses. So it was just a different mindset. But even now, I think, you know, although with these PEGS grants or whatever, some of our, you know, Olympic athletes and others, you know, I was actually kind of blown. It struck me when I kind of heard through the, I guess we'll call it the Olivia Podmore review, and I haven't read it yet, but you know, that of course we've got a number of our up and coming athletes, and certainly in rowing it would be to at least the under 23 level, who are on less than their employment benefit.
Yes.
And I, although I kind of have largely thought, you know, not thought about, it kind of struck me and like that's not right. That needs to be sorted. You can't, you know, in this day and age.
Well, I think it's very tough. And you know, they've had a lot of experience as young athletes who, you know, for them that's been a huge struggle. And one of the difficulties that I think is still not solved is facilitating tertiary study while they are training and racing. And I kind of call it the equal plan A, not a plan B. And we still have that mentality where we talk to young people and say, just in case this doesn't work out, you ought to study.
Yes.
Well, you know, we can do both, and that sort of thing. Is rowing an NCAA sport for women?
Yes, very much.
Right.
Yes. Oh, yeah, I think American scholarships have been very strong for years, because it's, well, that obviously New Zealand rowing's been strong, and yeah, the depth of them. So yes.
Because that's also a very good option for women through the recent changes within the last 10 years, with equal money having to go to both. And thank you so much. Thank you for looking after Wanganui after I left it in the late 80s. You know, when I drop back there, it looks pretty good actually, and I love Cook's Gardens. I think it's a remarkable place, and it does seem to have this kind of sense of both history and expectation. And so, yeah, well done.
Thank you. We're going to keep working on that expectation. Lots of plans in place to move along the next 5-10 years again. Thank you.
Well, I'll get Rod Dixon along there a bit more often. I think he's still got a good mile on him.
I'm sure.
50 years on September the 10th at the Munich Olympics, when the rowing 8 won their gold, and I remember they came back to the village, and Athol Earl, I went over to Athol to ask him to have a look at his medal. He showed me his medal. He put it around my neck. I held it, and 5 days later, I won a bronze medal. And it turned out that the rowers won gold, their fours won silver, and I won the bronze. So to give New Zealand gold, silver, bronze. So very cool.
Well, there you go.
But very,
Fabulous.
very powerful moment for me with the rowing 8. And of course, as you said, sort of met a lot of them. Simon Dickey was a great, great friend for many, many years. So with respect and everything to you, Philippa, you are a certain legend, certainly a legend for rowing women's sport, along with our great, great women athletes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Philippa. And Rod, you keep giving away the credit for that medal because you keep saying it was Sir Edmund Hillary who visited, then it was Sir Peter Snell, and now it's the rowing eight. You know, you're going to have to keep in mind that you played a part in winning it as well.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, it's all part of the journey, or lots of, side roads and highs and lows, and all these amazing people. And a lot of people think, well, he won that medal. I said, well, hold on. There's my brother, who is my coach, and the inspiration from Peter Snell and Halberg, and back to Jack Lovelock, and all these incredible people that just these are all little points of the compass that synergize everything we do. And I'm so grateful to this country and New Zealand and what I was able to do alongside with all our great athletes. And this is what's so important for the kids, Generation Skip, to learn how it was all done.
Absolutely. And it's still very possible, it really truly is. Keep believing.
Thanks so much,
Thank you,
Philippa,
Philippa.
and for being so generous with your time. And thanks, Rod. We'll catch up over the next few days again and get on.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Kia ora.